If a place could make you feel uneasy because of just one single detail, what do you think it would be? A column of black smoke hanging over a town all day long? A surveillance system so dense that the moment a stranger steps in, they're already being watched? A water supply that even the locals don't fully trust? Or industrial fires burning through the night, like a silent warning signal for the entire community? In today's video, we're diving straight into the 10 most dangerous towns in the United States, places where stopping your car in the wrong spot, turning down the wrong street, or simply showing up at the wrong time can lead to consequences far beyond imagination. These aren't popular tourist destinations, and they're not ghost towns on a map. They are real living communities with unspoken rules, dark histories, and unsettling traits that even locals warn outsiders about. Never stop here. Number 10. Flint, Michigan. In Flint, Michigan, danger doesn't lurk in some shadowy alley. It shows up in the most ordinary sound in the world, a faucet turning on. April 25, 2014 is the day this story quietly began, when the city switched its water source to the Flint River. There's a photo-perfect moment people still talk about. Officials pressed a button and even toasted the switch with cups of tap water, like it was a ribbon cutting for a brighter future. That tiny celebration is what makes Flint feel so unsettling, because the threat didn't arrive with sirens. It arrived with smiles. At first, the city looked normal. Same streets, same porches, same kids heading to school. But inside the pipes, residents started noticing things you can't unsee once you've seen them. Water that looked off, smelled off, tasted off. People complained, and they were told it was fine. It met standards. It was just a little discoloration. And that's when Flint stops being a water story and becomes a trust story. Because nothing is more chilling than being told your own senses are exaggerating. Then comes a detail that hits like dark comedy. By October 2014, General Motors reportedly stopped using Flint's water at one plant because it was corroding engine parts. Let that sink in. The city that built machines had water that machines didn't want. It's like a restaurant insisting the soup is safe while the kitchen quietly eats something else. And Flint's residents weren't asking for luxury. They were asking for the basic promise of modern life, that what comes out of your tap isn't a gamble. After months of pressure from residents and independent researchers, Flint reconnected to Detroit Water on October 16, 2015. A federal emergency was declared in January 2016. Those dates matter because they show how long people lived in that limbo, long enough for bottled water to feel less like a temporary fix and more like a lifestyle. Parents learned filter brands the way sports fans learned stats. Neighbors compared notes like amateur investigators. Every shower, every pot of pasta, every baby bottle came with a question in the back of the mind. Today, officials point to progress. Michigan's stricter lead action level is 12 parts per billion, and Flint's recent 6-month monitoring has reported a 90th percentile lead result of 3 parts per billion. In May 2025, the EPA lifted its 2016 emergency order for Flint's drinking water. That's the relief beat in the story, the part where you want to exhale. But Flint doesn't let you fully exhale because the real aftershock is psychological. The CDC says there is no safe level of lead in the blood, especially for children, and once a community has been told it's fine too many times, fine stops sounding comforting. So here's the question. Flint leaves hanging in the air long after the faucet is turned off, even if the numbers improve. How do you ever rebuild trust in something as intimate as a glass of water? Number 9. East Palestine, Ohio. In East Palestine, Ohio, danger has a shape you can't forget. Not a monster, not a gang. A black pillar of smoke rising over a quiet town like someone hit delete on the sky. It started on February 3rd, 2023, when a Norfolk Southern freight train derailed right through the heart of this place. The train was massive, about 149 cars long, stretching for nearly 2 miles. And the first chilling part is how small the trigger sounds when you say it out loud. An overheated wheel bearing? A hot box. like it's a snack at a movie theater, except this hot box was a warning that one tiny part of a machine was cooking itself into failure while the whole town slept. Trackside sensors picked up the temperature rising as the train rolled on, and by the time it reached East Palestine, the bearing was recorded at about 283 degrees above ambient temperature. That's the kind of detail that sticks with people because it feels like a moment where disaster was already on the tracks, already counted down, and nobody in the town had a vote. When it came off the rails, officials later said 38 cars derailed and multiple cars were carrying hazardous materials. A few days later, the image that defined the town went viral. A controlled release and burn, what people now call vent and burn, that sent that dark plume into the air. For some residents, that was the moment the story stopped feeling like an accident and started feeling like a question. If you can do that above our homes, what else can happen without us understanding it? Then came the geography of fear. Authorities established an evacuation zone of about 1 mile, and roughly 2,100 residents left for about 5 days. 5 days sounds short on paper. But in real life, 5 days is long enough for your toothbrush to feel like a luxury item, long enough for your kids to ask if home is still home, long enough for a town to split into 2 groups: the people who say, "It's fine," and the people who say, "Fine for who?" And here's what makes East Palestine a retention trap for viewers: the story doesn't end cleanly. Investigators later concluded that the vent and burn decision was not necessary to prevent an explosion, and that it was based on incomplete and misleading information. Meanwhile, environmental monitoring continued, weekly testing of the municipal wells and Sentinel groundwater sampling, because once a town has seen its sky turn black, reassurance has to fight uphill. East Palestine isn't just about what happened, it's about what lingers. Because when the danger is big enough to be seen from miles away, the real question becomes personal. Even if the headlines fade, how do you convince a town to trust the air, the water, and the people in charge again? Number 8. Paradise, California. In Paradise, California, danger doesn't announce itself with a headline, it arrives like a stopwatch. One moment you're in a quiet mountain town, the next, your entire life is reduced to a single question: which way out? On the morning of November 8, 2018, the campfire ignited near Poe Dam in Butte County. By 7:13 a.m., the small community of Polgar received its first evacuation notice. By 8 a.m., Concow and the town of Paradise were told to get out too. That timeline matters because it tells you what this place learned the hard way. In Paradise, the warning can come after the fire has already decided where it wants to go. Wind gusts pushed the blaze with a speed that felt unreal. Evacuation routes were affected, exits were blocked, and within hours, the town's familiar roads turned into a moving test of nerves. The official after-action report later noted that most of the destruction happened within the first 4 hours. 4 hours. That's shorter than a long movie, shorter than a typical Costco run, shorter than the time it takes some people to decide what they want for dinner. By the time the fire was fully contained on November 25th, it had scorched about 336 acres, destroyed more than 18,000 structures, and took 85 lives. Those numbers are heavy, but the signature of Paradise is even heavier. The feeling that normal can vanish faster than your brain can process it. And here's where the story grabs people by the collar. This wasn't only a nature story, it became a responsibility story. In 2020, PG&E pleaded guilty to 84 counts of involuntary manslaughter related to the campfire. For viewers, that detail changes the emotional temperature because it suggests the danger wasn't just the flames, it was the system around them. Now, Paradise is also a rebuilding story, and this is where you let the audience breathe for a second. As of May 15, 2024, the town reported 2,993 building permits issued and 2,170 homes rebuilt with certificates of occupancy. That's resilience you can measure, but it also raises a haunting practical question. When you rebuild in a place like this, what exactly are you rebuilding? Houses or hope? Locals talk about defensible space and evacuation alerts like they're part of breakfast. In Paradise, the phone notification isn't an annoyance. It's a lifeline. It's the kind of town where you don't just check the weather, you check your exit plan. So Paradise earns its place on this list because its danger isn't a rumor. It's a memory with timestamps. And if a town called Paradise can turn into a 4-hour race against smoke, what does that say about the next safe place on the map? Number 7. Centralia, Pennsylvania. A town where the danger is not on the corner, it is under your feet. The signature image here is a road that looks like it is breathing. You stand on a cracked stretch of old pavement and watch steam curl up from the ground like the earth is exhaling secrets. It feels almost cinematic until you remember this is not a special effect. This is a coal seam fire that has been burning beneath the borough since May of 1962. The kind of disaster that does not explode once and end, but keeps quietly rewriting a town for generations. Centralia's weird is simple to explain and hard to accept. The state warns that the area around the mine fire is extremely dangerous because gases can be present and the ground can collapse without warning. That is what makes this place so gripping. You cannot argue with it. You cannot negotiate with it. You cannot even see most of it. It is like living above a space heater that no one can find the switch for, except the heater is the planet itself. Then the story turns from science to surrender. Officials tracked the spread, tried control projects, and eventually the math became brutal. One local timeline shows that by the early 1980s, the stakes were clear enough that Congress funded a major relocation effort. By 1984, the voluntary acquisition and relocation program was underway. Centralia had around 100 people back in 1962. But by the 2010s, only a handful of property owners were still there. A town did not simply decline. It was peeled away, house by house, until the silence became the loudest thing left. But Centralia also became a magnet for cameras, because people cannot resist a place that looks erased. For years, the abandoned section of Route 61 turned into the graffiti highway, a bright, chaotic ribbon of paint in the middle of nowhere. It was like the internet left its signature on the asphalt. Then in 2020, even that got buried under thousands of tons of dirt. Centralia did what Centralia always does. It reminded everyone that this story does not belong to tourists. It belongs to the ground. If you want the emotional punchline, it is this. Centralia is a town where the danger is patient. It teaches a scary lesson with a calm voice. Sometimes the threat is not a villain. It is time, and if a place can be slowly erased by what is happening underground, what other normal towns are sitting on risks they barely notice yet? Number 6, Gary, Indiana. Number 6 is Gary, Indiana, and the signature image is a cathedral-sized warning sign, City Methodist Church. It broke ground in 1925, opened in 1926, and at its peak, it could hold about 3,000 people. Then it closed in 1975. Imagine a building designed for choirs, weddings, and packed Sunday mornings, now sitting silent like the city hit pause and never pressed play again. But here's what makes Gary stick in your brain. This is not a clean ghost town. This is a town that still has a heartbeat, and you can hear it in steel. Just minutes away sits U.S. Steel's Gary Works, the company's largest manufacturing plant, with an annual raw steel making capability of about 7 million net tons. So you get this surreal split screen, a ruined sanctuary on one side, and an industrial machine that still feels too big to be real on the other. It's like watching someone drive a brand new sports car while their house is missing 3 walls. Your brain refuses to accept both images at the same time, so you keep watching. Gary's danger isn't only about headlines, it's physical. It's the geometry of emptiness. Gary hit its population peak at 178,320 people in 1960. By the 2020 census, it was 69,093. That is not a dip, that is a city shrinking in slow motion. And when people leave, buildings don't politely disappear. In a 2015 survey, volunteers found nearly 7,000 vacant buildings, including 6,115 abandoned homes and 554 vacant businesses. That's where the tension comes from. A normal block can turn into a minefield of broken windows, unstable floors, and places nobody is supposed to be until they are. Then there's the part Gary doesn't get credit for, the part that makes the story heavier. The legacy isn't just economic, it's environmental. EPA cleanup summaries describe removing 800,000 cubic yards of contaminated sediment from the Grand Calumet River. You're on the edge of Lake Michigan looking at water that should feel like freedom, while the industrial past is still being scraped out of the riverbed like it never fully left. And yet, Gary also has a strange, almost unfair beauty. It sits on the southern shore of Lake Michigan and acts as a gateway to the Indiana Dunes area. So the mood whiplash is real. Soot and sunsets, steel and sand, ruin and shoreline. The question is not just what happened here. The question is, how does a place hold both worlds at once, and what does it do to the people who stay? In number 5, East St. Louis, Illinois. Across the river from St. Louis, there's a view that looks like America in postcard mode. The Gateway Arch rises clean and bright, and on a good day, the skyline feels calm, almost hopeful. Stand at Malcolm W. Martin Memorial Park and you can even find a symbol built to mirror that pride. The Gateway Geyser, designed to shoot water up to about 630 feet, roughly the height of the arch. But here's the unsettling part. This geyser has gone quiet at times, including a shutdown in 2023 for repairs and costs. It's a small detail, but in East St. Louis, small details often tell the truth. The image is beautiful and the reality is complicated. Because the moment you turn your back on the view, you're no longer in postcard America. You're in a city that once carried a huge industrial identity and then got left holding the bill when industries moved on. East St. Louis peaked around 82,366 people in 1950, and it was even named an All-America City in 1959, a title that sounds like it should come with a lifetime warranty. But history doesn't work like a warranty. It works like a slow leak. Jobs disappear, businesses close, families relocate, and the city doesn't collapse in one dramatic night. It thins out block by block until the emptiness starts to feel like a presence of its own. This is where the dangerous label gets its traction, and it doesn't need exaggeration. In 2019, with a population reported around 26,297, East St. Louis recorded 268 violent crimes and 36 murders in that year's FBI crime data. Those numbers hit harder because the city is small. It's the per-person weight of the statistics that makes people pay attention. And the psychological effect is simple. When a place carries that reputation, every shadow feels a little darker, every siren feels a little closer, and every empty lot starts to look like a question mark. East St. Louis also carries a long, heavy historical echo, including major racial violence in 1917 that left lasting scars on community trust and opportunity. You don't have to linger on the details to feel the aftershock. The point is that this city has been asked again and again to survive forces bigger than itself. Industrial shifts, policy decisions, and cycles of disinvestment that people in boardrooms barely remember. And yet the reason East St. Louis holds attention is the contrast. It's the two worlds, one river effect. You can watch the arch glow like a promise while you stand in a place still fighting to feel safe, stable, and seen. It's like the front of a postcard versus the back. On the back, the fine print reads, "Terms and conditions apply." So here's the question that hangs in the air. If two cities can share the same skyline, the same region, the same river, what decides which side gets the dream and which side gets the aftermath? Number 4, Huntington, West Virginia. In Huntington, West Virginia, danger doesn't always look like a crime scene. Sometimes it looks like a paramedic's hand closing around a tiny nasal spray kit, the kind of tool you hope you never need, but you keep close anyway. In this town, the most haunting sound isn't a gunshot. It's the quick, repeating rhythm of sirens that show up in the middle of an ordinary afternoon. Huntington sits along the Ohio River, and at first glance it feels like a classic American small city. Familiar streets, local diners, a college town heartbeat. But the signature of Huntington is how fast normal can flip into emergency. In 2016, the city saw a moment that still gets repeated like a warning label. 26 overdoses in under 4 hours. Think about that. Not over a weekend, not over a month. In a single short stretch of time, the kind of window where most people are deciding what's for dinner, first responders were running on pure adrenaline. That's why Huntington became a symbol on YouTube and in documentaries. The short film Heroine E followed local women on the front lines, including emergency response and community outreach, showing how a crisis can turn into a routine. And that's the unsettling part. When a crisis becomes routine, your nervous system never fully gets to clock out. The town starts living like a phone with 30 apps open at once. It might still function, but it's always one notification away from freezing. Then the story gets heavier when you zoom out. Cabell County, where Huntington is located, was reported to have hit an extreme peak in overdose deaths around 2017, with numbers so high they sounded unreal for a community that size. That statistic matters not because it's a trivia fact, but because it explains the mood you hear in people's voices, exhaustion, grief, and an argument that never really ends. Because Huntington isn't only fighting a drug problem, it's fighting a trust problem. You'll hear debates about harm reduction, about what helps, what enables, what saves lives today versus what prevents tragedy tomorrow. Some residents talk like they're watching their hometown get pulled into a riptide. Others talk like they're trying to build a lifeboat out of whatever they can find. Training, outreach, recovery programs, and sheer stubborn love for their community. And here's what makes Huntington dangerous in a way viewers don't forget. The threat is not far away. It's close enough to wear a familiar face. It's close enough to knock on the same doors again and again. The real suspense isn't will something happen. It's how long can a town hold itself together under this pressure. So when you see the flashing lights reflect off the pavement in Huntington, you're not just looking at an emergency. You're looking at a town trying to stay human while the alarm keeps ringing. And the question is simple, but it sticks. If a place can survive a crisis that arrives in waves, what does survival even mean? Getting through the night or finding a way to make tomorrow feel normal again? Number 3, Camden, New Jersey. A camera tower rises above the street, what locals call Sky Patrol, lifting surveillance gear roughly 35 feet into the air. It's not hidden, it's not subtle. It's a message you can see from down the block. This city decided it was done being scared. Camden earned its reputation the hard way, and the numbers from that era still hang over the place like old weather. In 2012, the city recorded 67 homicides. That figure doesn't just sound high, it sounds impossible for a small city, which is why it became a national headline and a YouTube magnet. People didn't just ask, what's happening in Camden? They asked, why, how does a place come back from that? And then Camden did something most cities never even consider. On May 1st, 2013, the city essentially hit reset. The old municipal police department was dissolved and policing was taken over by a new county-run force, the Camden County Police Department. That moment is the heart of Camden's story because it turns the city into a real-life experiment, not a policy memo, not a lecture, an experiment with real streets, real families, and real consequences. The plan wasn't just more cops. It was a change in posture, more foot patrols, more engagement, more focus on relationships, paired with a heavy dose of technology. Camden became famous for a dense network of cameras, the so-called eye in the sky, the kind of surveillance that makes some people feel protected and others feel watched. And that's why this story holds attention. It forces the viewer to choose a side without even realizing it. Would you rather live in a city where help is visible everywhere? Or one where you feel like your block is being monitored like a store aisle? The results are what keep people arguing. Reports citing local crime data over the last decade describe violent crime dropping dramatically, around 50%, and some categories like homicides, robberies, and burglaries falling even more steeply in the long run. In 2024, Camden officials pointed to 17 murders, described as the city's lowest count in decades. Those numbers create the hope beat. They tell you the reset wasn't just symbolic, but Camden's signature isn't a simple success story. The tension is the trade-off. Safety can rise while privacy feels smaller. The streets can feel calmer while the city feels like it's living under a bright, unblinking streetlight. Camden isn't just asking, can a city become safer? Camden is asking something sharper. If safety comes with the camera above your head, is that safety? Or is it a different kind of pressure? And when you watch that Sky Patrol tower lift into the air, the question follows you. If one city could restart its system and change the outcome, what does the next city on this list still refuse to change? Number 2, Jackson, Mississippi. In late August of 2022, Jackson's water system hit a breaking point after flooding and stress pushed the O.B. Curtis Water Treatment Plant into failure. Suddenly, running water stopped being a background assumption and became a daily strategy. People weren't debating restaurant reviews or football scores. They were asking basic questions that sound almost surreal in a modern city. Can I brush my teeth? Can I cook? Can the school open? Can the hospital function normally? When officials issue emergency warnings about tap water, it changes the whole mood of a place. It's not just inconvenience, it's the feeling that your life is running on a fragile backup plan. And that's what makes Jackson different from the other towns on this list. The danger here is quiet, constant, and domestic. It happens in your kitchen. It happens in your bathroom. It happens at 6 a.m. when you twist the faucet and realize you're negotiating with your own home. If Flint felt like betrayal, Jackson feels like exhaustion, like the city has been stuck buffering for years and the loading wheel never stops spinning. Then comes the part that makes the story bigger than plumbing. The crisis became so serious that it triggered federal involvement and court oversight. In November 2022, a federal court approved an interim order tied to EPA and Department of Justice action, designed to force real improvements in reliability and compliance. Jackson's water system was placed under an interim third-party manager, the kind of step that sounds extreme until you realize what it represents. The government essentially saying, oh, this cannot be allowed to fail like this again. When a city's water system needs a legal framework to keep it stable, that's not a repair, that's a reckoning. For a moment, that creates a breath of hope, because court orders, funding, and oversight sound like the beginning of a fix. But Jackson's story doesn't let the audience relax, because the city has another shadow that keeps getting mentioned: public safety. Reports have described Jackson as one of the nation's leaders in per capita homicide rates, including 118 homicides reported in 2023. You don't even need the details for the point to land. When a community is battling infrastructure stress and safety stress at the same time, it changes how people move, how businesses invest, how families plan their future. And that's the emotional punch of Jackson. It's a capital city that has had to live like it's in emergency mode, where bottled water can become a symbol and where normal life feels like something you have to earn back day by day. So here's the question that makes Jackson impossible to forget. If you can't trust the water that comes out of your faucet, and you can't fully trust the streets at night, what does home even mean? And how long can a city run on resilience before resilience runs out? Number 1, Port Arthur, Texas. At night in Port Arthur, Texas, the sky can glow like a permanent sunset, not from the ocean, not from city lights, from refinery flares, tall industrial torches that turn darkness into an orange haze and make the horizon look like it's quietly on fire. And here's the unsettling part. For many residents, this isn't a rare scene. It's background. It's the kind of thing you stop noticing the way you stop noticing traffic noise, until the noise changes pitch and your stomach tightens for no obvious reason. Port Arthur is number 1 on this list because the danger here isn't a single headline. It's stacked. First, the sheer scale. The Motiva refinery complex in Port Arthur spans about 1,400 acres and has a crude capacity of roughly 720,000 barrels per day, described as the largest refinery in North America. That number is almost too big to picture. So picture this instead: a machine city sitting next to a human city, separated by fences, roads, and the belief that it'll be fine. In daylight, the neighborhoods look normal. Kids get dropped off, corner stores open, people grill in backyards, but the refinery never really leaves the scene. It's always there, like a giant neighbor whose mood you have to read. When operations are smooth, life feels manageable. When something goes wrong, the fear is that you won't know fast enough because some threats don't arrive with a bang. They arrive as a smell you can't describe, a headache you blame on the weather, a worry you swallow because you still have to get to work. And then comes the second layer, storms. In Hurricane Harvey, 2017, parts of Jefferson County recorded more than 40 inches of rain, and the county reported over 64,000 homes flooded, with Port Arthur among the hardest hit areas. When water rises in a place built around heavy industry, everything feels like it's on a knife edge. Streets turn to rivers, power fails, and normal becomes a checklist. Phone charged, water safe, exits clear, family accounted for. After Harvey, there were public disputes around air monitoring, questions about what was in the air, what the data did or didn't capture, and who the community should believe. This is where Port Arthur gets into your head. Because it's not just the visible flare, it's the invisible uncertainty afterward. Even the system admits the risk exists. Federal rules pushed refineries to monitor pollutants like benzene around facility fence lines, basically treating the perimeter like a medical monitor for a patient that can't afford another surprise. And that's the signature tension of Port Arthur. Industry brings jobs and identity, but the people with the least financial cushion, where poverty rates have been reported around 29%, often have the smallest margin for error when disaster hits. So when you see that orange glow over Port Arthur, it isn't just a cool shot. It's a question hanging over the town every night. If your skyline can burn on purpose and your streets can flood overnight, how do you ever decide what safe means, especially when leaving isn't easy? So that's our list. 10 places that aren't dangerous in one single way, but in 10 different signatures. Water you can't trust, air you can't see, roads that turn into bottlenecks, systems that fail in slow motion, and skylines that glow like warning lights. And if there's one takeaway, it's this: danger in America isn't always loud. Sometimes it's routine, sometimes it's paperwork. Sometimes it's a normal neighborhood sitting beside something it never chose. Now I want to hear from you. Which town shocked you the most? And which one do you think is missing from the list? Drop your pick in the comments. And if you've lived near any of these places, share what it felt like day to day. If you want part 2 with 10 more towns and deeper on the ground stories, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because the next list gets even stranger.